Hey friends, thanks for joining me today here at Literaryhypewoman. Our guest today is a very accomplished man. You might not think of the word author when you think of Apolo Ohno, but he is doing that now too. He is the most decorated US Olympian in the Winter Olympics of all time. And now he's written a book. It's called Hard Pivot, and it's about making big changes in your life, like he did in divorcing himself from his Olympic identity and pursuing something else. So here is my conversation with Apolo Ohno. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Why do you think now is the time for people to pick up a book about making a hard pivot?
Well, I think change is critical, right? And we've seen tremendous amount of change over the past, not only 2 years, but the past decade, right? Societal change, social media change, sentiment change, acceptance change. And we're getting all these signals all the time. Automation, technology is improved or even taken away. Some of the skill sets that many of us have required that we relied on for many years. And I think that we need to embrace these things rather than bracing for those impacts. And so as we negotiate our time for money, which is really what we're doing most of the time, it's really important, I think, to realize and kind of become much more aligned with your true north, right? And so you may not love the career path and job that you do. Is there an alternative path? Always. Is there another choice? Of course. But you really have to start asking the deeper questions that are the most important, right? We typically tend to live our lives as if we are going to have an infinite capacity of time, but we don't. We have a finite amount, and in any day we can get sick, someone can get taken, things can taken from you, friends can you be lost, family members, loved ones, etc. And so it's really, really important to stay grounded and try to live each one of those days in a way that is more suited with what you feel like your purpose is. And that can be your family and your friends, your loved ones, career, whatever that is. And use those instances that have happened in your life as a lever, as a tool to propel you towards the goals that you think would be defined as a very well-lived life. So this is easier to talk about. And the book used to be like this thick, and we've like shrunken it down like 90% because I wanted to be practical. I wanted it to be easy. And I wanted people to start asking the more introspective questions themselves. Not to say like, this is what works for me and therefore it's going to work for you, but rather how do we initiate the conversation that allows you to start to explore what is the best path forward for yourself, right? In relationship, in career, and whatever that might be. And that's the real intention behind why I think this book is so necessary as we go and we kind of embrace all these changes in our life.
And kind of going with that, why are you the person that people should listen to, or at least take your voice into consideration when trying to come up with their next step?
Well, I don't by any means say that I'm an expert in reinvention, but I've had to reinvent myself multiple times in my career post Olympics. So for the past 12 years. And the book is really intended to show the reader in a way that says, here's the conversations that I have had between my own two ears. Here's an open look at my book. Here's why I behaved the way that I did. Here's what made me obsessive. Here's some of the toxic elements of that negative self-talk or deprecation that exists in all of us. And the idea there is not to show me as the expert, but to show someone who has achieved things that no one else has done in sport, in my sport, and say like, I'm actually the same as you. I've had the same conversation. I'm genetically not designed better than the 90% of my competitors. They were better genetically designed than I was, but we figured out a way, and so can you. So that is the intention here, is to kind of level the playing field. And this is extrapolated from literally thousands of hours spent with all of the greatest performers that I've considered to be highly successful in their career paths: actors, actresses, businessmen, businesswomen, the creative arts. It goes on and on. And there seems to be similarities and commonalities amongst all of their paths in terms of reinvention and how they embrace these problems into challenges, into opportunities.
We just had a study that came out this week that like we're in the middle of what they're calling the great resignation of people changing jobs, but a good chunk of people regret it. What kind of nugget or like one focal point do you think people need to think about when making these kind of decisions so they don't come to a place where they regret their change?
Well, I think the grass always looks greener on the other side. And then what you want to restrain yourself from, without this lack of planning and the mechanics of embracing change, are that we typically bounce back and forth between the two fences, right? This grass looks green, and then you look back over to where you were, you're like, oh, that grass looks green. And then, like, over the course of a decade, you're like actually no further along in your progress than you were before. So I think first and most fundamentally, if you're seeking a change on the outside, you need to start looking on the inside. That's the most important factor here, right? If you actually, you're seeking transformation, change, abrupt resignation, whatever that might be, it starts from within. You need to start having that inquisitive nature and discussion around who are you? Where are you? Why are you doing these things the way that you are? Is there room for improvement? How do your friends and family think about you? What are some of those attributes that they think that you carry with you that maybe you don't think about yourself? And I think you'll be really surprised as you go through these lists and you start to document on, the old school handwritten paper of how you'd like this to actually unfold. And again, you cannot control the outcome, but to focus on the process over the prize is a critical piece to eliminating or at least mitigating that risk of having regret, because we want to live a life with regrets, right? And although we have many mistakes that we make in our life, I think it's up to us to be able to say, okay, have I mapped out this in a way that I'm really aligned? Am I focused more on the fantastical idea of the result being the thing that I'm chasing? Or is this new career path or this new journey actually going to fulfill me and reward me in ways that I think that I won't get in the current one? And then that's how you can have a deeper contextual conversation about whatever this change is. It's easier to talk about this, but when you start writing them down, it becomes very, very crystal clear. And having that clarity is a big part of making excellent decisions as you govern your own speed limit.
Tell me about your 5 golden principles.
5 golden principles: gratitude, giving, grit, gearing up, and go. So gratitude, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? How do you kind of deeply feel this like simplicity of like some of the things that we take for granted on a daily basis? They can be rooted in your family and your career and things that have happened just that morning. But it's just like a daily practice that I do on the daily. Typically every morning, I write down 3 things that I'm deeply grateful for. Giving is that opportunity to kind of give time, attention, resources, et cetera, to other people in your communities and your coworkers and your family, but also giving yourself the best possible chance of having success. And so a part of that is kind of removing this natural self-saboteur that exists in a lot of our career path or life path. And mainly because we're afraid, at least I'm speaking from my experience, of showing up fully and it simply not being enough. And then we have to deal with that consequence that we are less than. So, but preempting that, I think, is you have to put yourself out there and just remove some of those, self-imposed obstacles. The third one is grit. That's just really, embracing the fact that this journey is never easy. Life is very volatile. Things happen all the time that you can't control. We've seen what has happened over the past 2 years, what's happening right now. It's been a very, very chaotic and sometimes confusing time. And so it may not make sense during that particular moment that you're kind of staying zoomed in, but as you zoom out, you realize that in the greater context and the layer that you are experiencing, there's an ability here to really kind of dig in deep and know that you can do the really hard stuff. And so with more practice comes more repetition comes more consistency, and more consistency starts to normalize that behavior to tell you that you can do that hard stuff. The fourth one is gearing up. That's setting your expectation. So raising the bar for yourself, not accepting anything less than, and just saying like, I'm ready to step up to the plate, right? And create this in a way that I need the courage to go out there and attack whatever it is that I'm trying to pursue. The last one is go, and that's just removing that obstacle of perfectionism or that paralysis that has held you back for so long, and instead just saying like, I'm going to go out there and try it. I'm going to go test the water. I'm going to see how I'm operating and what this looks like, and from there it should be pretty powerful.
You wrote about that relationships are the difference between success and failure. What should people be looking for in the relationships that surround them to help them reach success?
The five personal board of directors, and it can be 1, it can be 3. I found 5 to be that sweet spot, because I typically get 3 experts who I trust in one particular vertical or particular question or problem I'm having, and then 2 to give a different view because they've got no experience. And so that 5 seems to be perfect for me. The idea behind surrounding on this like social community that exists. We're tribal by nature, but we also want to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves people who A, have our best interests in mind, B, hold us accountable. Really important. We don't need yes men and yes women in our life. We need people who can tell us straight up exactly what they feel, and then we can take that granular information and we can put it into play. So I've always said, like, community is really important, right? If there's 4 pillars of how we live our life: how are you sleeping, how are you eating, how are you thinking, and how are you moving? The 5th would be, how are you communicating? How are you socializing? How are you interacting with that? So although the 4 foundational kind of strongholds that I think are anchors that I seem to focus on the most when my life seems to be getting off track, that 5th one is really, really the supercharging factor. Because when I feel like I've ingrained in my micro community or a few close friends, I feel like it's unexplainable. You feel important. You feel like you're supposed to be there. You feel cared for, and that's reciprocal. You want to do the same for those loved ones, and it's a critical piece. And I think that's what we all missed during the height of the pandemic in the past 2 years.
How does the process of writing a book compare to like your Olympic training experience?
Well, I naturally am not the best writer, and so it took me 2.5 years to write this book. And a big part of that was this like long-standing struggle with trying to use my militant-like discipline that I had from the training of the Olympics and applying that towards something that potentially is a little bit more creative in its inception. So creativity shouldn't be confined, right, by like a box. It needs to actually run flow and freely. So it was very different than the Olympic path. And I have like 90,000 hours. I have not that many, but I've got like hours and hours and hours of like recorded transcription and material, hopefully for the next book.
Oh, is that already in the works?
Yeah. The idea is to have, like, in this kind of philosophical process and conversation, to have other iterations while also tapping into more, I call it advanced levels of psychological and mental training that can hopefully help change behavior in a way that's really positive. But it's like, it takes real work and training. So that was much more this book was designed to start the conversation. The next book is going to be designed to carry the conversation. And the last one is going to be able to close the loop as we begin a new chapter.
Do those have release dates yet?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Fine, I guess I'll have to stock Edelweiss for it, whatever. One other thing that I saw that was really interesting is that you don't identify as an Olympian anymore, which I was a Division I rower, had an Olympian for a coach, and he never talked about it either. Why do you think that is, that Olympians like close that off and when they do something different?
Well, some do, some don't. Some still carry the medal with them wherever they go. I would say that a part of it is in this very first chapter, the first couple of chapters in my book, where we talk about the great divorce. Right? My first true love was the sport. It was what I did. It was what made up my identity. And I didn't decide to go back to my sport and become a coach or get ingrained with the management of the sport. Instead, I chose a complete opposite path. And that meant for me was to pour my cup of knowledge out and my title, what was on my business card, and instead start focusing on those attributes. And so I'm very proud of the opportunities that I was given for the sport, but I don't necessarily want to be leading with that all the time. It's just by nature, and I've accepted that. Some people only remember it as such, and that's okay, but I'm always kicking and screaming and scratching for, I'm so much more than. There's other facets of my personality that I haven't shown you yet, and here's where they are now. I hope this book helps a lot of people and can remind them of how powerful they can be if they really, really want to be.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all the time that you have for me, so I will let you get on with your life.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
I hope you found a little nugget in that conversation with Apolo Ohno that helps you on your journey as you pursue your passions and your purpose. Thanks for joining me here on Literary Hype Woman. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the interviews and shenanigans coming your way.